In a secluded village nestled between rugged hills and dense forests, a legend whispered on the wind, the story of the silent moon. The villagers spoke of it in hushed tones, a tale of something greater than the stars, something that watched over them for centuries. Yet no one truly understood what it meant, and only a few believed it to be more than just a myth. Elena, a young woman from the village, had heard this story since childhood. Her grandmother, known for her wisdom and sharp memory, often told her the tale of the silent moon, of how it once helped their ancestors survive a terrible disaster that nearly wiped them from existence. But as the years passed and modernity crept into their lives, the story became nothing more than an old fairy tale. People forgot, or perhaps chose to forget, the meaning behind it. But Elena couldn't shake the curiosity that gnawed at her heart. She had grown up on the story, and though most of the villagers dismissed it, something in her heart told her that the silent moon was real. It wasn't just a fairy tale. It was a warning, a guide, a sign that there was something greater at play in their lives than they understood. One evening, as the sun dipped beneath the horizon, Elena sat on the edge of the village, gazing up at the sky. She noticed something strange, something she had never seen before. The moon, typically a shining beacon of light, appeared dim, shrouded by a strange fog that clung to its edges. It was the silent moon, as described by her grandmother. But this time it seemed different. The air around her felt heavier, as if the very earth was holding its breath. Elena felt a chill run down her spine, but she couldn't look away. She felt compelled to act, as if something deep within her soul was stirring. Without a second thought, she stood up and began walking toward the dark forest that bordered their village. The path was overgrown with vines, and the thick trees loomed like silent sentinels watching over her. As Elena ventured deeper into the woods, the mist thickened, and the sounds of the village faded into an eerie silence. The world around her seemed to hold its breath, waiting for something. She had no idea what she was seeking, but she had an undeniable sense that the silent moon was calling her. Suddenly, she stumbled upon an ancient stone circle hidden deep within the forest. The stones were worn and weathered, their surfaces etched with strange symbols and patterns. Elena recognized some of the symbols from the old stories, symbols that her grandmother had once mentioned. She felt an odd sense of familiarity wash over her, as though she had been here before, in another life. At the center of the stone circle, she noticed a large stone pedestal, upon which lay a faded map. The map was old, its edges frayed, but it was unmistakable. It depicted the village, the surrounding hills, and a series of landmarks that matched the tales her grandmother had told her. Elena's heart raced as she traced the lines of the map with her fingers. As her fingers brushed over the surface of the map, a sudden gust of wind howled through the trees, and the silent moon above glowed brighter, casting an ethereal light upon the stone pedestal. The symbols on the pedestal began to glow faintly, illuminating the area around her. Elena's breath caught in her throat as she realized the truth. The silent moon was real, and it was guiding her towards something ancient and powerful. Before she could make sense of what was happening, a voice broke through the silence. It was soft, like the whisper of the wind, yet it resonated deep within her soul. "Elena," the voice said, "you have been chosen. She looked around, but there was no one in sight. The forest remained still, and the moonlight illuminated the stones, casting strange shadows that danced in the quiet night. Chosen for what? Elena whispered, her voice trembling. The voice responded, this time louder, as if the entire forest was speaking through it, to protect the balance, to restore what has been lost. Elena's heart raced as the words sank in. The silent moon had chosen her for a purpose, a mission she did not yet understand. But she knew one thing for certain. She could not turn back now. She had to follow this path, wherever it would lead. The voice continued, the world is on the brink of destruction. The balance that has kept the forces of nature in harmony is crumbling. You are the only one who can restore it. Elena's mind raced. The balance? Destruction? What was this all about? She had always believed in the old stories, but this was more than just a legend. It was a reality, and it was hers to face. Suddenly, a wave of dizziness swept over her, and she staggered back, nearly collapsing. The stone pedestal before her seemed to shimmer, and the symbols on it flashed bright for a moment before fading back into their dull glow. Elena blinked, trying to clear the fog in her mind. When her vision cleared, a figure stood before her. It was a woman, tall and regal, with eyes that seemed to see through her. The woman was dressed in flowing robes that shimmered like the night sky, and her face was serene but full of ancient wisdom. Elena, the woman spoke again, her voice calm but commanding. You have been chosen to restore the balance. The silent moon is only a reflection of the balance of the world. When it fades, so does the harmony between all things. The path will not be easy, but you must succeed. The future of your people depends on it. Elena nodded, her mind swirling with confusion and fear, but also determination. How do I restore the balance? She asked. The woman smiled softly. You must seek the 3 lost stones. Each stone holds a key to the power that once united the world. Find them, and the balance will be restored. With that, the woman vanished into the mist, leaving Elena standing alone in the stone circle. Her heart was heavy, yet a spark of hope ignited within her. She had a mission now, one that would take her to places she had never dreamed of, one that would challenge her in ways she never thought possible. As she turned to leave the stone circle, the silent moon above grew brighter, its light pouring down upon her like a guiding star. Elena knew that her journey was just beginning, and though she had no idea where it would lead, she would face it with courage. The silent moon had chosen her, and she would not fail. The following morning, Elena returned to the village with a heavy heart and a mind filled with questions. She couldn't yet make sense of everything that had happened in the forest, but one thing was clear. The silent moon was real, and her life had been forever changed. She met with her grandmother, the woman who had first told her the legend of the silent moon, and told her everything that had happened. Her grandmother listened intently, her weathered face unreadable, until Elena finished. You've seen it, haven't you? Her grandmother asked softly. The silent moon, it spoke to me. It chose me to restore the balance, Elena replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Her grandmother's eyes flickered with recognition, then sorrow. I had hoped you wouldn't be the one, child. The silent moon has chosen someone before, many generations ago. But no one has succeeded. It's a heavy burden, one that can break the spirit if you aren't careful. Elena's heart sank. What do you mean? What happened to the last person? Her grandmother hesitated, her face shadowed by memories of long ago. The last chosen one was a warrior, strong and fearless, but he failed. And when he failed, the balance was tipped. The world began to wither, and the silent moon dimmed. No one has dared to seek the stone since, but you've been chosen, just as he was. But why me? Elena asked, her voice trembling. I'm not a warrior. I don't even know where to start. Her grandmother placed a hand on her shoulder. The silent moon doesn't choose for strength. It chooses for the heart. The stones are scattered, hidden by time and nature. But they are there. You must find them one by one. And when you do, the balance will be restored. You may not know how to wield the stones, but the journey will reveal it to you with those words. Elena set out once more, this time with a sense of purpose. The first stone, her grandmother had said, lay in the heart of the mountains, the towering peaks that bordered their village to the north. Legend spoke of the mountain's ancient guardians, beings made of stone and earth, who protected the secrets of the world. Elena packed her belongings, including a satchel of food and water, and set off toward the mountains. The journey was long and treacherous. She traveled for days, crossing rivers, scaling cliffs, and battling exhaustion as the days turned into nights. But no matter how difficult the path, the light of the silent moon seemed to guide her, its glow unwavering, like a distant star shining through the clouds. Finally, after days of arduous travel, Elena reached the base of the mountains. The peaks loomed before her, towering like silent giants, their tops shrouded in mist. She stood at the foot of the mountain range, taking a deep breath, when she noticed something strange. There in the distance, she saw a figure, a tall, cloaked figure standing at the edge of the cliff, gazing out over the valley below. The figure turned slowly, as if sensing her presence. "Who are you?" Elena called out, her voice carrying across the wind. The figure did not answer immediately, but instead moved closer. As it stepped into the light, Elena's breath caught. The figure was not human. Its face was covered with a mask of stone, and its body was draped in flowing robes made of woven vines and leaves. The creature was both beautiful and terrifying, its form radiating ancient power. "I am one of the guardians of the mountain." The creature's voice echoed, deep and resonant, like the sound of a distant thunderstorm. "I am here to protect what lies within." Elena took a step forward, her heart racing. "I've come to seek the first stone. The silent moon has chosen me." The guardian studied her carefully, its mask unblinking. "The silent moon has chosen you, yes. But do you truly understand the weight of the task ahead? The stones are not easily obtained. They are not just objects. They are the key to the survival of the world." "I understand," Elena said, her voice steady despite the fear that churned in her stomach. "I will do whatever it takes." The guardian nodded, as if satisfied by her resolve. "Very well. The stone you seek lies at the peak of this mountain. But to reach it, you must prove yourself. You must face the trials of the mountain. Only then will you be worthy. Elena nodded, her determination unwavering. She had no choice but to face the trials. The fate of the world and the silent moon depended on her. The guardian stepped aside, allowing her to pass. As Elena made her way up the mountain, the air grew colder and the terrain more treacherous. The path narrowed, and the wind howled around her, as though the mountain itself was trying to push her back. Suddenly, the ground beneath her feet trembled. Elena looked down to see cracks forming in the rock, opening like the jaws of a great beast. She leaped to one side just as the ground split open, sending a shower of stones tumbling down the mountainside. Her heart pounded in her chest as she scrambled up the rocky ledge. "Is this the trial?" she muttered, glancing nervously around. As she climbed higher, the wind picked up and the air grew thicker. A faint glow appeared in the distance, her destination. She pushed forward, ignoring the fear creeping into her thoughts. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, she reached the summit. There, nestled in a small alcove, was the first stone. It was not large, but it pulsed with an inner light, glowing softly in the dimness of the mountain. Elena approached it cautiously, her fingers trembling as she reached out to touch it. The moment her fingers made contact, the world seemed to shift. The stone glowed brighter, and a voice, ancient and deep, resonated within her mind. "You have passed the trial, Elena," the voice said. "The first stone is yours. But beware, for this is only the beginning. Many trials await you, and each will be harder than the last. But you must press on. The fate of the world lies in your hands." With the stone now in her possession, Elena turned to leave, her heart swelling with hope. She had taken the first step, and though the path ahead was uncertain, she knew Elena descended the mountain with the first stone. She was ready for whatever lay ahead. The weight of the ancient power growing heavier with each step. The journey back was no less perilous than the climb had been, but the thrill of having secured the stone filled her with a new sense of determination. She could feel the energy of the stone pulsing within her palm, and as she walked, she could almost hear faint whispers, voices from the past, urging her forward. By the time she reached the village, the sun had already set. The village was quiet, with only the flickering light of a few fires casting shadows on the ground. Elena's grandmother, having sensed her return, met her at the edge of the village. "You have it," her grandmother said, her eyes gleaming with both pride and fear. Elena nodded, pulling the stone from her bag and holding it out to her grandmother. The moment the elder woman touched it, her face softened, as if recognizing a long-lost friend. "This is only the beginning, my child," her grandmother whispered, her voice filled with awe. "The stone holds much power, but it also comes with a great responsibility." "I understand," Elena replied, her voice steady. "The journey isn't over yet." Her grandmother nodded. "No, it has only just begun. The next stone lies in the heart of the forgotten swamp. You will face new trials, but remember this. The silent moon will always guide you, even when the path seems unclear." Elena's heart swelled with gratitude. She knew the next phase of her journey would be just as difficult as the first, but she also knew she couldn't turn back. The world depended on her. The forgotten swamp was a place spoken of in hushed tones by the villagers. It was said to be a labyrinth of twisted trees, fog, and stagnant water, where the very air seemed to weigh heavily on the mind. Many who ventured there never returned, swallowed by the murky depths or lost within the maze of gnarled roots and vines. Yet, Elena had no choice but to go. With the first stone safely secured in her satchel, she set off for the swamp. The journey was long, and the landscape grew more foreboding as she neared her destination. The trees seemed to close in on her, their branches twisting into grotesque shapes, as though they were watching her every move. The sky above was overcast, and a dull, greenish light filtered through the thick fog that blanketed the ground. As she entered the swamp, the air grew thick and heavy. Each step seemed to sink deeper into the muck beneath her feet, and the sounds of unseen creatures echoed in the distance. The feeling of being watched crept over her like a cold shiver, but Elena pressed on, the stone in her bag acting as her only beacon of hope. She had been walking for hours when she heard it, an eerie, melodic hum that seemed to come from all around her. She paused, her senses alert, her heart pounding. The sound was like nothing she had ever heard before, both haunting and beautiful. Elena, the voice called, soft and distant. She froze. It was the same voice she had heard in the mountain, the voice of the silent moon. The stone in her satchel pulsed in response, and she knew she was close. Elena, the voice called again, this time clearer, more urgent. Find the heart of the swamp. Only then will you find the stone. The path ahead of her seemed to twist and turn, but she followed the voice, letting it guide her deeper into the swamp. The further she went, the thicker the fog became. The trees were now nearly suffocating, their branches tangled together in an almost impossible weave. After what felt like an eternity, Elena stumbled upon a clearing in the center of the swamp. In the middle of the clearing stood a massive, ancient tree, a tree unlike any she had ever seen before. Its trunk was covered in thick moss, and its roots spread wide, disappearing into the murky waters below. At the base of the tree, lying half submerged in the water, was the second stone. It glowed faintly, its surface covered in strange runes that pulsed with an eerie light. Elena approached the stone cautiously, her fingers trembling. She could feel its power radiating, calling to her. As she bent to retrieve it, the ground beneath her shook. The air grew colder, and the water surrounding the stone began to churn violently. From the depths of the swamp, a figure emerged, tall, with skin like the bark of the trees and eyes that glowed with an unnatural green light. It was a creature of the swamp, a guardian, just as the mountain had won. Its voice echoed, low and menacing. "You seek the stone," the creature growled, "but it is not so easily obtained. To take it is to claim the power of the swamp itself. Are you willing to bear that burden?" Elena stood tall, clutching the stone in her hand. "I am willing to do whatever it takes to restore the balance." The creature studied her for a long moment, then stepped aside, revealing the stone fully. "Then take it. But remember this. The swamp will never forget the one who claims its power. It will follow you, always, with a steady hand." Elena reached for the second stone and lifted it from the waters. The moment her fingers touched it, a wave of energy surged through her, and the world seemed to shift. The swamp around her began to quiet. the creatures retreating into the shadows. The two stones pulsed together, their energy resonating in a way that made Elena feel as if the entire world was holding its breath. Elena returned to the village as the first rays of dawn broke through the fog. She had the second stone, and now she had to prepare for the final leg of her journey. The third stone, her grandmother had told her, lay in the ruins of an ancient temple deep in the desert, where the sun burned hotter than any other place in the world. But before she could embark on her next journey, she stopped at the village square and gazed up at the sky. The silent moon was full once more, its silver light shining down upon the world, and Elena felt a deep sense of peace settle in her heart. She had come so far, but there was still much to do. The journey was far from over. The world still needed her, and the silent moon would guide her every step of the way. Elena's journey to the desert was not one she undertook lightly. The forgotten swamp had been challenging, but the desert promised a different kind of peril. Its vast, unforgiving landscape stretched out before her like an endless sea of sand, the heat oppressive and relentless. The sun, a blinding orb in the sky, threatened to drain her strength with every passing moment. Yet, Elena knew that the third stone awaited her, somewhere in the ruins of an ancient temple buried deep within the desert's heart. With the first two stones secured, the weight of her task had grown heavier. But it was not just the stones she sought. The balance of the world was fragile, and the silent moon had chosen her for a reason. She couldn't afford to fail. The wind howled across the dunes, carrying with it the scent of dry earth and the promise of danger. Elena had been walking for hours, her body aching, her mouth dry. She had learned to conserve her water, taking small sips whenever she could, but the heat was relentless. The sun beat down from above, making the world shimmer and blur at the edges. As she trudged on, the landscape began to shift. The sand beneath her feet grew warmer, almost unbearably so, and the air itself seemed to warp, distorting her vision. The heat was so intense, it felt as though she were walking through an oven. The sound of her footsteps was the only thing she could hear, each step a reminder of the distance she had yet to cover. But the stone in her satchel burned with an inner fire, guiding her forward. The silent moon's presence was stronger now, filling her with an urgency that pushed her to move faster, even when every muscle in her body screamed for rest. It wasn't until the third day that Elena saw the ruins. From the top of a high dune, she spotted the ancient structure, half buried in the sand, its jagged stones jutting out like the bones of some long-dead creature. Her heart raced as she descended toward it, the thrill of discovery mingling with the weight of what she knew was to come. The temple had been hidden for centuries, its secrets locked away by the desert itself. But Elena had the key, the stones, and the silent moon's blessing. As Elena stepped into the ruins, she was immediately struck by the eerie silence that filled the air. The temple, though weathered and worn by time, was still magnificent. Tall columns lined the entrance, their surfaces etched with intricate carvings that seemed to shift and change as she gazed upon them. The walls were covered in faded murals, depicting scenes of gods and warriors, their faces frozen in time. Elena ventured deeper into the temple, her footsteps echoing off the stone walls. The temperature inside was cooler, But the atmosphere was thick with an ancient power that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. She could feel the presence of something old, something powerful, watching her every move. At the heart of the temple, she found the altar. It was a simple stone slab, but it radiated an energy unlike anything she had ever felt before. On the altar lay the third stone, glowing softly with an ethereal light. Elena approached it slowly, the weight of her decision pressing heavily upon her. She had come so far, endured so much, and now the final piece of the puzzle was within her reach. She could already feel the power of the stone calling to her, the silent moon's energy guiding her hand. But as her fingers brushed against the stone, a voice filled the chamber, low and guttural. "You seek the stone," it said, the words reverberating through the stone walls. "But what you take, you must give." Elena froze. She knew that voice. It was the voice of the temple itself, a guardian, just as the swamp and the mountain had one. "I've come for the stone," Elena replied, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. "I am ready." The voice chuckled, a sound like grinding stones. "Are you truly ready, Elena? You have already claimed the power of the first two stones, but the third holds a different price. It is not just a stone. It is the heart of the desert itself." Elena stood tall. "I've faced the trials of the swamp and the mountain. I will not turn back now." The voice was silent for a moment, as if considering her words. Then it spoke again. "The stone will grant you the power to restore balance, but in doing so, it will take something from you, something that can never be returned." Elena swallowed hard, her heart pounding in her chest. She had known this moment would come, the moment when the cost of the stones would be revealed. But she was determined. She had come too far to back down now. With a deep breath, she reached for the third stone and lifted it from the altar. The moment her fingers closed around it, the ground shook violently. The temple seemed to come alive, its walls groaning under the weight of centuries. The stone pulsed with a power so intense, Elena could feel it coursing through her veins. It was as if the very desert was merging with her, the sand and stone becoming a part of her soul. The voice returned, this time softer, almost sorrowful. "You have claimed the heart of the desert, Elena. The cost is high, but the reward is yours." Elena felt a sharp pain in her chest, as though something vital had been ripped away. She gasped, stumbling back, clutching the stone to her chest as the world around her seemed to spin. The pain was blinding, but as quickly as it had come, it faded, leaving her breathless and shaken. She looked down at the stone in her hand, its glow now steady and bright, and knew that the final trial had just begun. Elena's heart pounded as she made her way back to the village. The three stones, now securely in her possession, pulsed with an energy that seemed to resonate with the earth beneath her feet. The world around her felt different, charged, alive, as if the very air was holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable. The desert had been a brutal trial, one that had demanded more than she had expected. The third stone had taken something from her, a sacrifice she couldn't fully comprehend. It was a part of her, and yet she knew that it was also something more, something the silent moon had taken for its own purpose. The weight of it all pressed down on her, but she couldn't afford to falter. The balance of the world depended on her success. The stones were the key, but they were only the beginning. As Elena entered the village, the familiar sight of her home brought little comfort. The village was eerily quiet, the usual sounds of life muted, as if the land itself sensed a change. The stone pathways she had once walked with ease now felt heavy beneath her feet. She could almost hear the echoes of the trials she had faced in the distance. The villagers had gathered at the square, their faces filled with expectation. They had heard of her journey, of the 3 stones, and now their eyes were fixed on her. They had placed their hopes in her, just as she had placed her trust in the silent moon. Elena knew that she could not fail them. Not now. "Welcome back, Elena," came a voice from the crowd. It was old Nia, the village matriarch. She was the first to step forward, her frail body draped in the robes of wisdom. Her eyes, though aged, held a sharpness that had seen more than most could ever imagine. Elena nodded in acknowledgement, feeling the weight of her silence. She had no words to offer, only the stones. She held them out to Nia, who took them in her hands with reverence. The moment the stones touched her palms, the village seemed to exhale collectively. The air shifted, as though the very earth had recognized the return of its guardians. The glow of the stones bathed the square in a soft, ethereal light. "The silent moon has guided you, child," Nia said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But the journey is far from over." Elena's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" "I've brought the stones back. The balance can be restored." Nia's gaze grew heavy. "The stones are but one part of the equation. They must be placed in the heart of the land, the sacred mountain to the north. Only there can the final act be completed." A chill ran through Elena as she looked at the ancient woman. "The heart of the land. I thought the trials were over." "No," Nia said softly. "The trials are just beginning. The stones have been reclaimed, but the forces of darkness have not rested. There are those who would see the world fall into chaos. You must complete the final ritual, or everything you fought for will be in vain." The heart of the land was a place of legend, a mountain so high that it pierced the heavens. It was said that only those with the silent moon's blessing could reach the summit. And Elena knew that her journey, though long, was not yet complete. The stones were powerful, but they were not invincible. She had to place them in the heart of the mountain, where the earth's core met the sky, and only then would the world be restored. The path to the mountain was treacherous, winding through dense forests and barren plains. But Elena's resolve had been hardened by the trials. She had come too far to turn back now. As she neared the mountain, the air grew colder, the winds harsher. The sky darkened, as though the world itself were preparing for the final clash between light and darkness. When Elena reached the summit, she found herself face to face with a figure cloaked in shadow. It was a presence she had felt before, a force that had followed her through the swamp, the mountain, and the desert. The silent moon had warned her of this moment, the moment when darkness would rise to challenge the light. The figure stepped forward, its features hidden beneath the cloak. But Elena could feel the malice radiating from it, the desire to consume everything in its path. "You are too late, Elena," the figure hissed. Its voice was like the whisper of death itself. "The balance is already broken. The stones cannot save you now." Elena held her ground, clutching the stones tightly in her hands. She knew the truth. The stones held power, but it was not the stones alone that could restore the world. It was the heart of the one who carried them. The silent moon had chosen her, and that meant she had the strength to face this final challenge. "I will not let you win," Elena declared, her voice steady, despite the fear that clawed at her insides. The figure laughed, the sound echoing off the mountainside. "You think you have the power to stop me? The silent moon's light is fleeting. It will die with you." But Elena was not afraid. She raised the stones high above her head, feeling the power of the silent moon course through her. She called upon the strength of the trials, the wisdom of the stones, and the courage that had carried her this far. In a flash of light, the stones erupted with a brilliance that blinded the figure. Elena felt a surge of energy flow through her, the power of the silent moon fusing with her own. The figure screamed, its form dissolving into nothingness as the light engulfed it, and then silence. Elena stood alone on the summit, the stones now fused with her own spirit. The darkness had been vanquished, but the cost was great. She had sacrificed everything to restore balance to the world, and in doing so, she had become a part of the silent moon's legacy.